Rain poured down on Highway 41 when a young German shepherd stumbled in the dark, its paws raw, a rope cutting deep into its neck. Every step was a fight to stay upright. In the distance, flashing blue and red lights pierced the storm. Officer Ethan Walker had seen enough to know this was no accident. In that moment, saving the dog wasn't just his duty. It was personal. What happened over the next few hours would uncover a hidden trail of cruelty, a chase through back roads, and a decision that would change both their lives forever. By the end, one man would lose his freedom, and one dog would find a home. Before we start, tell me, what city are you watching from tonight? The storm rolled over the outskirts of Springfield, Missouri, like a slow, relentless tide, painting the world in streaks of water and shadows. Highway 41 shimmered under streetlights, its black surface reflecting distorted halos of orange and white. The windshield wipers of the police SUV swept back and forth with mechanical determination, but visibility was still poor enough to make even a seasoned officer lean forward. Sergeant Ethan Walker, 36, sat behind the wheel, eyes sharp despite the fatigue of a double shift. Tall and broad-shouldered, Ethan carried himself like someone who used to be a sprinter, but now ran more on duty than for leisure. His square jaw was lined with a few days of stubble, and faint crow's feet framed his steel-gray eyes. His dark brown hair, cropped short beneath his cap, was already damp from when he'd stepped out earlier. He looked like the kind of man who had seen enough of the world to stop expecting it to make sense, but still hadn't stopped trying to do right by it. Ethan was a man shaped by quiet grief. He'd lost his younger brother, Ben, in a drunk driving accident 10 years ago, something that changed the way Ethan treated people on the job. He wasn't quick to arrest unless he had to. He gave second chances. But there were things that didn't deserve patience. Like what he saw next. Through the rain-drenched windshield, Ethan squinted. A faint shape moved behind a rust-colored pickup truck about 60 yards ahead. He leaned forward, slowed down, and let his headlights cut through the sheets of water. Then he saw it. A dog. Not just any dog. A young German shepherd, maybe 2 or 3 years old, soaked to the bone, stumbling as it was dragged by a length of rope tied to the truck's rear bumper. Its hind legs buckled, front paws splayed as it tried desperately to keep up with the slow but steady crawl of the vehicle. The rope was taut around its neck, jerking it every few steps. Blood mixed with mud on its matted coat, and its ribs showed under the wet fur. Ethan's chest tightened. Without hesitation, he flipped on his red and blue lights, siren off, and accelerated to overtake the truck. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. His gut churned as adrenaline flooded his veins. The pickup didn't stop. Ethan hit the horn, a long, angry blare. Still nothing. His jaw clenched. He moved into the left lane, accelerated past the truck, then swerved gently to block its path. The cruiser's tires hissed on wet pavement as it came to a halt, forcing the pickup to brake hard. The rope slackened, and the dog crumpled in a heap on the road. Before the engine fully stopped humming, Ethan was out of the vehicle. Rain slapped his face as he rounded the front of the SUV. His boots splashed into shallow puddles. The dog lay motionless, its sides heaving with labored breath. The rope had burned a deep groove into its neck, and both back paws were scraped raw. Its fur, once surely rich and noble in black and tan, now clung in wet clumps, streaked with dirt and blood. But when Ethan knelt beside it, its amber eyes lifted to meet his. There was no growl, no flinch, just a flicker of pleading trust. "Easy now," Ethan said softly, kneeling beside it. "I've got you." He drew out the utility knife clipped to his duty belt and sliced the rope clean. The end dropped with a soft plop onto the pavement. The dog's body shuddered. Its breath was hot and shallow. Ethan gently placed a hand beneath its neck and the other beneath its back legs, then lifted. The dog didn't resist. It merely sagged into his arms like it had finally found something safe. As he turned, he caught sight of the driver. The man had stepped out of the truck, standing in the steady downpour like it didn't touch him. Mid-40s, gaunt face with sunken cheeks and pale skin. He wore a drenched gray work jacket and faded jeans. His hair was short and greasy, and a ragged beard clung to his chin. But what stood out most was the expression, or lack of it. Empty, not defiant, not ashamed, just hollow. Ethan shouted over the rain, "Turn off the engine! Hands where I can see them!" The man didn't move. Ethan didn't waste another word. He turned back toward his cruiser, opened the rear passenger door, and gently laid the German Shepherd on the seat. He reached into the back for a foil blanket and wrapped it around the shivering dog, tucking it carefully around its injured legs. The dog whimpered once, a soft sound of pain, but also, Ethan thought, of relief. He slammed the door shut and turned back toward the pickup. The man was still standing by the truck, blinking slowly, like he was watching a movie that had nothing to do with him. Ethan approached with calm authority, his voice low but hard. "What the hell were you doing?" No answer, just a tilt of the head, the smallest shrug, a pathetic display of indifference. "You're under investigation for animal cruelty. Keep your hands visible." The man raised them slowly, still without speaking. Ethan radioed dispatch for backup and animal control, giving them the location and requesting the nearest emergency vet that was open. As the rain lightened into mist, Ethan leaned against the door of his cruiser, looking back at the dog inside. Its eyes were still on him, still trusting, still alive. The cruiser's heater hummed against the cold. Ethan glanced into the rearview mirror, where the dog lay motionless on the vinyl back seat, wrapped in a crinkling emergency blanket. The German Shepherd hadn't moved since Ethan had set him down, save for the occasional tremble in his chest, like his lungs were still unsure whether breathing was worth the effort. Ethan adjusted the dashboard vents, directing more heat toward the back. Outside, the storm had quieted to a drizzle, the kind of mist that seemed more like breath than rain. Headlights sliced through the wet black, cutting a path down the winding rural roads of southern Missouri. "You hang in there, buddy," Ethan muttered under his breath. "We're not done yet." He didn't know why he'd called him buddy. Maybe it was instinct, maybe it was hope. But halfway to the Ozark Veterinary Clinic, a name surfaced in his mind and refused to leave. Ranger. It felt right. Not just because the dog looked like he should have been patrolling a fence line somewhere, but because something about him had that same stoic resilience Ethan respected in men who didn't talk much but always showed up. He glanced at the dog again. "Ranger," he said quietly. No response, but he hadn't expected one. The veterinary clinic sat on the edge of a sleepy two-stoplight town, a single-story building tucked beside a closed feed store and a faded billboard advertising homemade jam. The sign read, "Ozark Veterinary Clinic, emergency entrance and rear." Ethan pulled into the gravel lot, stones crackling under the tires, and brought the cruiser to a stop near the back door. The building was dark except for a faint glow inside one of the hallway windows. He stepped out, his boots crunching on the gravel, and opened the rear door carefully. Ranger blinked at the sudden motion, but didn't lift his head. Ethan slid one arm beneath the dog's chest, the other under his hindquarters. The fur was soaked, gritty, and matted with blood near the paws. Ranger whimpered low, but didn't resist. Ethan lifted him gently and carried him toward the back door. Before he could knock, the door cracked open. Standing there was a woman in her late 40s, tall and thin, with an elegant posture that belied years of standing over exam tables. Her chestnut brown hair was pulled back into a tight bun, streaked with silver at the temples. She wore blue scrubs beneath a weathered olive jacket, and her pale skin was flushed with the chill air. Her face was sharp, not harsh, but efficient high cheekbones, narrow nose, and eyes the color of dark glass, always scanning. Dr. Meredith Collins had the kind of presence that didn't need a raised voice. She'd worked as a vet for 21 years, known across 3 counties for being the one who took in the animals no one else wanted. People said she didn't have time for nonsense, but if you brought her something truly hurt, she'd skip sleep for days. She took one look at Ranger and stepped aside. "Bring him in." The lobby was dimly lit, smelling of antiseptic and lavender, with scuffed tile floors and outdated posters about flea prevention. She led Ethan down the hallway without further questions, stopping at the nearest exam room. A metal table sat in the center, under a suspended light. "Set him there," she said, already pulling on gloves. Ethan laid Ranger down gently. The dog whimpered again, legs twitching involuntarily. Dr. Collins didn't flinch. Her hands moved quickly, checking pulse, respiration, and gum color. She examined the rope burns along Ranger's neck and legs with clinical precision. Severe dehydration, possible internal bruising. Those paws are torn up. Probably road rash. "You get him like this?" "Yeah," Ethan said quietly. He was being dragged behind a pickup truck on Highway 41. Dr. Collins stopped briefly, her jaw tightening. Then she turned toward a small intercom on the wall and pressed a button. "Claire, I need a warm IV setup and trauma bandages." Moments later, a younger woman appeared in the doorway. She was in her mid-20s, short and round-faced, with dyed lavender hair tied into two playful buns. Her name tag read, Claire. She moved quickly but gently, her wide brown eyes growing wider when she saw Ranger's condition. "Oh no," she whispered. "Let's move," Dr. Collins said. "Gloves on." Ethan stepped back as the two women began to work cleaning wounds, setting up an IV, applying salve to the torn paws. The room filled with the soft rustle of bandages, the hum of equipment, and the occasional sharp snap of a plastic container being opened. Ranger barely moved. Ethan stood in the hallway just outside, arms crossed tightly over his chest. The adrenaline had faded, leaving a cold ache behind it. He watched through the glass-paneled door as they continued their work, his jaw clenched every time Ranger twitched in pain. He couldn't stop thinking about those amber eyes. The way they had looked at him, not with fear, not even just pain, but with something far harder to forget. Trust. The kind that only comes when a creature's been let down so often, they've stopped giving it freely. And then, suddenly, they do. The hallway was quiet except for the occasional creak of floorboards and the soft patter of rain on the roof. Ethan leaned against the wall, let his eyes fall shut for a moment, and breathed in the antiseptic air. He didn't know what it was about this dog. Maybe it was the timing. Maybe it was the way Ranger hadn't tried to fight. Maybe it was because he'd once seen a boy look the same way after being pulled out of a trailer full of cigarette smoke and silence. But Ethan knew this much. He wasn't going to let Ranger go back to that kind of world ever again. Dr. Collins eventually stepped into the hallway. Her gloves were off, her sleeves pushed up. Her face had softened a bit, though fatigue was creeping into her expression. "He's stable for now," she said. "I've sedated him lightly so he can rest. The burns are bad, but treatable. No broken bones, which is a miracle. We'll monitor him overnight and check for internal bleeding." Ethan nodded, his voice a little hoarse. "Thank you." She studied him for a moment. "You're his owner?" He hesitated. "Number. But I'm the one who found him, and I'm not leaving." Dr. Collins offered a brief, approving nod. "We've got a bench out front. I'll check on him again in an hour. He's lucky you found him when you did." As she walked away, Ethan sat down heavily on the worn wooden bench by the lobby window. Outside, the rain had thinned to a drizzle again, tracing quiet streaks across the glass. He looked up at the ceiling, then down at his mud-stained boots. "I won't let it happen again," he whispered to no one. Not to Ranger, not on his watch. The clock above the clinic's reception desk ticked past 2:30 a.m., but Ethan Walker didn't feel the time. He sat slouched forward on the bench, elbows on knees, watching the mist of his breath curl against the window pane. Outside, the gravel lot glistened, glazed with rain. Inside, everything smelled faintly of antiseptic, wet fur, and lavender. Down the hall, the door to Ranger's exam room had been left ajar, just enough for Ethan to catch the occasional silhouette of Dr. Collins checking vitals or whispering something to her assistant, Claire. He appreciated the silence. No forms to fill out yet, no decisions demanded, just a night that, for now, belonged to rest. His body, though, ached in places he hadn't noticed before. Shoulders stiff from tension, boots still damp from the road, stomach empty but unwilling to eat. Still, every now and then, he felt the faint echo of the dog's breath on his arm, the trust in those trembling limbs. That feeling, impossible to explain, kept him from leaving. Dr. Collins stepped into the lobby just after 3 a.m., peeling off her gloves. She looked tired, but steady. "He made it through the first hours. That's a good sign," she said. "But he'll need several days of observation. We'll need to monitor for infection, neurological symptoms, and internal bruising. He's lucky and strong." Ethan stood, rubbing the back of his neck. "And after that?" She studied him, eyes narrowing as if measuring something beyond the surface. "Do you plan to turn him over to the shelter?" "No," Ethan said quickly. "I mean, no, not unless I have no choice." "You don't strike me as someone who makes decisions on impulse," she said. "I don't." He paused. "But I've seen eyes like his before. I've worked cases abused kids, neglected seniors. People throw living things away like they're trash. I don't know what this dog's been through, but I know what it looked like to him when I showed up tonight. and I'm not about to let him go back to that. A moment passed before Doctor Collins gave a quiet nod. All right, he's yours for now, but you'll need supplies, food, antibiotics, a better blanket than that foil one. I'll write you a care list and get the first round of meds prepped. Thanks, Ethan said, voice a little lower than before. She disappeared back into the hallway. Ethan exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of the commitment settle on his shoulders, but also a strange lightness underneath. He wasn't just rescuing the dog anymore. He was keeping a promise. By the time the sun crept up, the storm had broken into scattered mist. The sky glowed soft gray over Springfield as Ethan pulled into the parking lot of Pine Hollow Pet Supply, one of the few places that opened before dawn. The shop was a converted house with faded blue shutters, a wooden porch out front, and a hand-painted sign with paw prints on it. A soft bell rang as he stepped inside. The air was warm, thick with the scent of grain-free kibble and rawhide chews. Shelves were neatly arranged with collars, toys, canned food, and bins of dog biscuits in glass jars. Behind the register stood a woman in her late 30s, maybe 40, with a runner's build and a kind smile. Her name tag read Melissa. She had a practical look, dark brown skin, short coiled hair, glasses perched on the edge of her nose. Her clothes were plain, a navy hoodie and jeans, but everything about her posture radiated calm. "Morning, officer," she greeted, then looked him over. "You're either here for a very early patrol or a very unexpected pet." "Both, actually," Ethan said with a tired smile. "I need supplies for a German Shepherd, young adult, injured." Melissa's brows lifted slightly, but she didn't ask more than needed. "Follow me." She led him through the aisles, pointing out the orthopedic beds, high-calorie wet food, paw balm for cracked pads, and a collar with a padded interior. "You'll want a wide one," she said, handing it to him. "Avoid anything that presses the neck." Ethan held it in his hands and pictured it resting gently over healing wounds. "Yeah, that's good." She handed him a sturdy nylon leash. Matching set, non-slip grip. He added it to the growing pile. Melissa glanced at him sidelong as she filled a small basket. "Looks like you didn't plan to be a dog owner this week." "Didn't plan it," he said. "Didn't plan on sleeping in a vet clinic either. But he didn't have anyone. So now I guess I'm it." She smiled gently, not with pity, but with something else. Sometimes they choose us before we know it. Ethan paid in cash and declined a receipt. Before he left, Melissa tucked a sample bag of liver treats into his hand. "Freebie," she said, "soft enough for sore teeth, and good for trust." He nodded, throat a little tight. "Thanks." Back at the clinic, Ranger was resting on a towel inside a small recovery crate. His eyes fluttered open as Ethan entered, ears twitching just enough to lift from the pillow, still weak, but aware now, present. Ethan knelt beside him, setting the bag of supplies down quietly. "Hey, buddy," he said, "got you a bed softer than that steel table." Ranger didn't move much, but when Ethan reached toward him and said his name again, "Ranger," the dog's ears lifted a little more, and his eyes followed the sound like a tether. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Ethan smiled. "Yeah, that's you." He gently placed the new collar beside the crate, still wrapped in its paper tag. "Won't put it on you yet, not until that neck heals. But when it does, we'll try this together." Dr. Collins returned with a clipboard, listing feeding instructions, medicine schedule, and signs to watch for. She spoke clearly, never once treating Ethan like an amateur. He appreciated that. Before leaving, he sat beside the crate for a long while, just watching Ranger breathe. The dog's chest rose and fell slowly, but more evenly now. No gasps, no jerks, just tired rhythm. The clinic had other patients, other calls, but for now, this little space felt like a shared silence. Two survivors measuring each other in glances and quiet understanding. "You're safe," Ethan said, barely above a whisper. Ranger's eyes flickered. One paw stretched slightly toward the front of the crate, touching the edge of Ethan's boot. A connection, faint, but real. And Ethan, despite everything else waiting outside that clinic door, reports, briefings, patrol shifts, knew one thing. He wasn't walking away. Not now, not ever. The sun had barely crept over the tree line when Ethan Walker pulled into the small municipal lot behind the Springfield Police Department. The cruiser was quiet, but Ranger, bundled in a blanket beside him, was awake now, ears perked and gaze alert. The night had softened some of the pain in his body, and there was new awareness in his eyes, a spark of something returning to the surface. Ethan gave him a small nod before stepping out. Inside, the station was beginning to stir, the smell of cheap coffee mixed with paperwork and cold air as officers came and went. The clatter of keyboards echoed through the hallway alongside the low murmur of shift change updates. Ethan walked into the briefing room where Sergeant Dave Miller stood pouring his fourth cup of coffee into a chipped mug that read, "Don't make me use my sergeant voice." Miller was 52, built like an oak post and twice as weathered. He had thick forearms from decades of field work, a gut he never pretended to hide, and a face carved with frown lines. His reddish-brown beard was grizzled with gray, and his mustache curled slightly at the edges like an old-school lawman. Miller had seen it all, and took most things with a dose of dry humor and quiet disdain for bureaucracy. He raised his mug as Ethan walked in. "Heard you played Dog Whisperer last night." Ethan gave a tired smile. Wasn't whispering, just listening. Miller lowered his voice, more serious now. "He's still breathing?" "Barely, but yeah, stronger than he looks." Miller nodded, then leaned back against the counter. "Got something that might matter. You remember those animal abuse reports from Greene County a couple of months back? The ones that never stuck? Yeah, barn dogs are disappearing. A couple of them were found starved or chained up outside abandoned lots." "Right. Well, turns out a deputy out that way flagged a guy for loitering near a cattle lot last week. Same type of vehicle, rust-colored pickup, busted taillight. The driver didn't stick around. They didn't have enough to hold him." Ethan's brow furrowed. "Got a name?" Miller took a sip, then slid a plastic evidence bag across the table. Inside was a faded blue hand towel, frayed at the edges, stained with grease and something darker. "No name, but this was found near one of the sites. Canine hairs, old blood. We processed it, but no match. Figured it's nothing." Ethan took the bag slowly, staring at the fabric. Miller continued, "Might be a long shot, but if your pup reacts to it, might tell us something." "I'll try," Ethan said. An hour later, Ethan sat with Ranger in the small enclosed patio behind the vet clinic. The early morning air was crisp, and the sky above was pale with winter light. Dr. Collins had agreed to let him test the towel, there less distraction, more space if something unexpected happened. Ranger lay at Ethan's side on a folded quilt, his movement slower but steadier. His fur had been cleaned, wounds treated with balm and gauze. He still wore no collar, but a faint pride had returned to his postureless prey, more protector. "Okay, Ranger," Ethan said gently, pulling the evidence bag from his jacket pocket. He opened it slowly, letting the scent reach the air in stages. As soon as the towel left the bag, Ranger stiffened. His ears shot up. His nose twitched violently, and a low growl curled in his throat. "Whoa, easy," Ethan began, but Ranger was already standing, his legs wobbling beneath him, but determined. The growl grew deeper. Then he barked, loud, once, then again. His body twisted toward the fence at the western side of the lot, his nose pulling him that way, like a wire had snapped tight inside him. Ethan stood quickly, startled. "Ranger, what is it?" The dog pulled again, not frantic but focused, every muscle straining westward. The growl had become a steady series of deep-throated warning sounds, his eyes locked on something far beyond the horizon. Dr. Collins stepped outside, just as Ethan turned. "What happened?" she asked. Ethan showed her the towel. He recognized the scent, strong reaction. He wants to go west. She looked at the dog, then back at Ethan. "You think he knows something?" "I think he remembers more than we thought." By late morning, Ethan had returned to the station, towel and Ranger both secure in the cruiser. Miller reviewed the report with a sharp squint. "You're saying the dog reacted like he had a trail?" "Exactly like that. Instant aggression, tracking behavior. He wasn't panicked, he was locked in." "You thinking of using him like a canine?" Ethan shrugged. "Not officially, he's not trained. But whatever's in his head, it's tied to whoever had that towel." Miller rubbed his jaw. "We had a field camera near Old Mill Road. Picked up a truck matching that pickup's description 2 nights before one of the attacks. You take the dog out that way, see if he leads?" I can try. Miller hesitated, then nodded. Take Reyes with you, just in case. The sky over Ash Grove was dull with gray clouds, the kind that felt heavier than rain and carried a strange, pressing silence with them. The fields around the town were long, dead stalks of winter-killed grass brushing against fence posts, empty silos rusting in place. The wind moved through without resistance, whispering down gravel roads and abandoned lots. Ethan stood beside the cruiser, eyes narrowed at the broken-down structure ahead. The building looked forgotten. An old supply warehouse, with one side sagging inward, its corrugated walls streaked with rust. Faded lettering above a warped sliding door read, Pine Ridge Grain and Feed Company. Half the letters had peeled away. The building sat on the western edge of Ash Grove, just off a private dirt road marked with a sun-faded no trespassing sign. Behind him, Sergeant Dave Miller exited the second cruiser, his thick boots crunching over gravel. He adjusted the strap of his utility vest and took a slow glance at the perimeter. "This is the kind of place you find bodies," he muttered. "Let's hope it's not that today," Ethan said. At his side, Ranger was already pulling forward, tail low, ears pricked, every muscle in his body pointed toward the warehouse like an arrow drawn tight. Ethan gave him slack on the leash. "Go slow, partner." Ranger sniffed the air, nose twitching rapidly. The German Shepherd had regained much of his strength in the past 48 hours, though the pads of his back paws were still healing. His coat had been brushed, bandages trimmed, but there were still faded burns circling his neck and hind legs. Still, he moved with purpose. They followed him toward the left side of the building, where the metal siding had peeled away just enough to reveal a gap beneath the frame. "Here," Ethan said, pointing. "Entrance." Miller grunted. "Got the warrant in motion. Told dispatch we might need animal control backup, too." Ethan nodded, then bent down to inspect the edge of the siding. A faint line of tire tracks led around the back recent, pressed into the dirt with tread still clear. "I'll go first," Ethan said. Miller didn't argue. He just unlatched his sidearm holster, keeping his right hand loose. Ethan ducked into the gap, flashlight drawn. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing dust hanging in the air like ash. The warehouse interior smelled of mildew, rusted iron, and something worse, decay, faint but unmistakable. Piles of broken pallets leaned against the walls. A chain hoist hung uselessly from the rafters. The deeper they went, the more the shadows thickened. And then they saw them. Lined along the left wall, half in the dark, were 5 large metal cages, each about 5 feet long. Rusted bars, dried fur clinging to corners, food bowls crusted over. Most were empty now, but 2 had blood-stained blankets, shredded into knots. Miller swore under his breath. "This isn't some teenager playing dogfighter. This is organized." Ethan knelt by one of the cages. The latch was dented like it had been kicked open. The floor was littered with fragments of nylon rope, a leather collar half burned, and a broken muzzle. Ranger stiffened beside him. Then he growled. Low, steady, not fear-anger. Ethan turned. "What is it?" The dog moved to the far corner of the room. There, hidden behind a tall stack of rusted grain bins, sat a pickup truck, dark red, caked in mud. Its right rear bumper was bent inward. One of the taillights was shattered. Rope fibers dangled from the hitch like spiderwebs. Ranger's hackles rose. He began barking sharply, pawing at the tires. Ethan stepped forward, heart pounding. The license plate, barely visible under layers of grime, read 9C3-GR2. Miller came up beside him, breath caught. "That's the one. That's the exact plate from the Greene County reports." "I'll call it in," Ethan said, voice tight. He stepped back, hand already reaching for the radio clipped to his vest. "Dispatch, this is Unit 204. We've located the vehicle matching the plate from the active cruelty case requesting immediate warrant enforcement and a team for site processing. Multiple animal containment units confirmed. Requesting CSI support and secure transport." Ranger barked again, once, sharp, then fell silent. Ethan turned back to him. "It's okay, Ranger," he said, crouching. "You did well." The dog looked up at him, tongue just barely out, chest still rising fast, eyes alert and burning. Miller walked toward the passenger door of the truck. "Let's see what else this bastard left behind." Inside, the cab was a mess of receipts, trash, and duct tape. A toolbox sat open on the passenger seat: pliers, bolt cutters, gloves. Under the floor mat, Miller pulled out a cheap prepaid phone with a cracked screen and a roll of film. No camera, just the film. "We'll bag this," he muttered. They didn't find anyone at the warehouse that morning, but it didn't matter. Between the blood, the cages, and the pickup, there was enough to secure a warrant and enough to know that someone had been using this place for a long time. Ranger sat beside the front tire of the truck, quiet now, staring at the door as if expecting someone to return. "You remember this place, don't you?" Ethan whispered, placing a hand on his neck. "You were here." Ranger leaned against him gently. Ethan didn't speak again. Neither did the dog. The night hung heavy over Route 125. The moon was a sliver above the horizon, barely cutting through the thick clouds that blanketed the Ash Grove outskirts. Officer Ethan Grant leaned back in his cruiser, sipping lukewarm coffee from a dented thermos. The radio buzzed quietly with routine dispatch chatter, but Ethan's thoughts were locked on one thing: the rusted truck from the warehouse. Ranger, seated beside him in the passenger seat, let out a soft grunt. The 6-year-old German shepherd's ears twitched, eyes alert. His brown and black fur glistened slightly in the dim dashboard light, still a little damp from earlier rain. Ethan reached over and scratched behind the dog's ear. "You feel it too, don't you, buddy?" Just then, a pair of headlights pierced the fog ahead. A vehicle approached slowly, too slowly for this stretch of road. Ethan straightened in his seat, setting down the thermos. As the vehicle came closer, he recognized it instantly. A beaten-up Ford F-150, green with rust creeping up its fenders and fresh mud caking the wheels. The license plate matched the one they had reported from the warehouse site. No doubt about it. Ethan flicked on the red and blue lights and pulled out onto the road, closing the distance. The truck didn't speed up. Instead, it glided to a calm stop by the shoulder, as if the driver had been expecting this moment. Ethan stepped out of his cruiser, hand resting on his holster. Ranger followed, staying close, his breath forming clouds in the cool night air. As Ethan approached the truck window, the driver lowered it halfway, revealing a man in his late 40s with deep lines etched into his weather-beaten face. The man's hair was short and peppered with gray, messy as if he hadn't run a comb through it in weeks. A thick, patchy beard covered most of his jawline, stained with tobacco. His eyes were a washed-out blue cold, unreadable. "Evening, officer," he said with a voice like gravel. "Evening," Ethan replied evenly. "License and registration, please." The man moved slowly, retrieving the documents with exaggerated care. Ethan's eyes scanned the interior of the truck-empty passenger seat, a battered duffel bag, and a crowbar tucked beside the door. His instincts tightened. The ID read, Vernon Hale. Ethan's gut clenched. The name matched the one Miller had dug up the property owner listed on the abandoned warehouse. A recluse, no criminal record, but plenty of whispers. A man who once ran a kennel out in the countryside until complaints and lawsuits forced it to shut down. No one had seen him much since. "You know why I pulled you over, Mr. Hale?" Ethan asked. Vernon shrugged, lips twitching in a half-smirk. "Taillights busted again? You were driving suspiciously slow. Given recent investigations, this vehicle matches one reported at a potential animal cruelty site." That wiped the smirk off Vernon's face. His grip on the steering wheel tightened. "That's so?" Beside Ethan, Ranger let out a low growl, his nose pointed at the duffel bag. "You mind stepping out of the vehicle, sir?" Ethan asked, tone still calm, but with steel beneath it. Vernon didn't move. His eyes flicked to Ranger and held for a beat too long. "That your mutt?" he said. "Smart one, I bet. He's a partner. Saved a child's life last week." There it was, a flicker. Something hard and cold crossed Vernon's face. His jaw tightened. "Animals ain't what people think they are," Vernon said flatly. "They're tools. They obey, or they get put down." Ethan took a careful step back and repeated, "Step out of the truck." Vernon slowly complied. He opened the door and stepped down. He was taller than expected, over 6 feet, with a rangy build that spoke of physical labor. His clothes were stained and smelled faintly of metal and something acrid. Ethan didn't flinch. "You keep referring to animals like they're just things," Ethan said, "but I've seen what they can do. I've seen what happens when they're loved and when they're broken." "Don't preach to me," Vernon snapped. "I did what I had to. No one wanted those dogs. I just made use of 'em." "Use?" Ethan's voice hardened. "We found cages, chains, and bloodstains. That wasn't use. That was torture." Ranger took another step forward, standing between Ethan and Vernon now. His hackles were raised, a low, rumbling warning in his throat. In that instant, headlights appeared behind them. Another cruiser rolled up. Deputy Miller. Miller stepped out, tall and broad-shouldered in his thick winter coat. His shaved head reflected the cruiser's lights, and his breath came out in short bursts. His usual easygoing expression was absent tonight. "Got him?" he asked. Ethan nodded. "Positive ID, Vernon Hale, vehicle matches, and he just made a few very interesting comments." Miller approached with a pair of cuffs. Vernon's face twisted. "I haven't done anything wrong tonight," he spat. "But you've done plenty before," Miller said coldly. "And now we have a warrant. Step forward." Vernon's hands curled into fists, but he didn't resist. Miller cuffed him tightly, reading the rights as he did. Ethan noticed the way Vernon glanced once more at Ranger. "That dog. He's trouble." "No," Ethan replied, stepping closer. "He's justice." They loaded Vernon into the back of Miller's cruiser. As they prepared to leave, Ethan crouched down beside Ranger. "You did well, partner." Ranger licked his hand once and sat, staring down the road where Vernon had come from. As if he knew this wasn't the end, just a corner turned in a much darker maze. The courthouse in Springfield stood tall against the early spring sky, its sandstone facade glowing in the morning sun. Inside, the air was hushed but thick with resolution. A final gavel strike echoed through the chamber like the closing of a door long left ajar. Vernon Hale, once a man who moved through town with a sly grin and a predator's calm, now sat rigid in his faded prison-issued uniform. His wiry frame seemed smaller beneath the weight of justice. The same cold glint that once flickered in his eyes during interrogation had dulled. The judge, a silver-haired woman named Judge Naomi Sanders, known for her steel backbone and unwavering commitment to child welfare, sentenced him without a tremor in her voice. Decades behind bars, no chance of parole. The silence that followed was not empty. It was relief. Outside, the town buzzed with whispers of closure. The coffee shop owner on Main Street taped the front page of the Springfield Chronicle to his window. Guilty. Vernon Hale, sentenced in shocking abandonment case. Below the headline was a photo Ethan with a firm hand on Ranger's back, both staring forward, resolute. Ranger, now fully recovered, sat proudly by Ethan's side that morning. His sable and black coat had regained its rich shine. The once battered hind leg now carried him with a renewed grace. The scar on his flank remained a soft reminder of his battle, but his eyes held the unshaken loyalty of a soldier who had returned home. Ethan Hayes, standing tall in his Springfield PD uniform, had changed too. The hardness in his jaw hadn't softened, but the sorrow that once clouded his blue eyes had lifted. The trauma of losing his K-9 partner years ago, killed during a failed drug bust, had left an imprint, making Ethan wary of ever bonding again. But Ranger had cracked that wall with quiet courage and unspoken trust. Today he wore a navy blue tie instead of the usual tactical gear. Today was not about enforcement, it was about family. That afternoon, Ethan walked into the county office, a folder in hand, his gait steady. The woman behind the desk, Linda Faulkner, a kindly clerk in her early 60s with curled auburn hair and reading glasses hanging on a beaded chain, greeted him with a warm smile. "Officer Hayes," she said, recognizing him instantly. "I believe we have your papers ready." He nodded. "I'm here to make it official." Linda slid the folder toward him. "It's done then. Ranger is yours, not just your partner, but your dog, for life." Ethan ran his hand across the adoption papers, fingers briefly lingering on the signature line. He picked up the pen without hesitation and signed. That evening, the sun dipped low over the rooftops of Springfield, casting long golden streaks across the sidewalk. Ethan and Ranger stepped out of the station, side by side. The leash between them was more ceremonial than necessary. Ranger walked like a shadow at his side, alert yet at ease. As they strolled through the neighborhood, familiar faces waved and nodded. Mrs. Callahan, the florist with periwinkle blue hair and thick garden gloves, offered a smile. "That dog saved more than one life," she called out. "Give him a treat for me." I already did, Ethan replied with a chuckle. Ranger's ears twitched at the mention of treat. They passed the elementary school, where a group of kids pointed excitedly through the fence. "It's the hero dog!" one boy shouted. Another mimicked sirens as they ran along the gate. Ranger tilted his head at the children, tail swaying in slow, rhythmic motion. Ethan stopped for a moment to let them pet him through the chain link. The children's laughter, innocent and unburdened, warmed the air more than the sun ever could. Eventually, they reached Springfield Park, a quiet stretch of green flanked by maple trees just beginning to bud. Ethan took a seat on a wooden bench overlooking the lake. Ranger sat beside him, tongue out, content. Ethan looked out across the water, his voice low. "You know, I thought I was done letting myself get close again. After Max, I figured I couldn't go through that pain twice." Ranger let out a soft huff and nudged Ethan's knee with his muzzle. "But then you showed up with those sharp eyes and stubborn will. You didn't just rescue that little girl. You pulled me back too." Ranger lay down beside the bench, one paw crossed over the other, gaze focused on the ducks floating lazily by the shore. He looked every bit the sentinel, even in stillness. From the corner of the park, a figure approached slowly. A young woman with dark skin and thick dreadlocks pulled into a high bun. Her name was Brielle Thompson, a local freelance journalist who had covered the case from the beginning. Dressed in denim and a tan coat, she radiated energy and sincerity. "Mind if I join you?" she asked. Ethan nodded, motioning to the open space on the bench. "I just wanted to say thank you," Brielle said, glancing at Ranger. "Your story brought a lot of people hope. I've had readers write in saying they cried, said it helped them heal in their own way." Ethan offered a small smile. "I didn't do it for the story. I did it because someone had to." Brielle looked down at Ranger. "Well, someone had 4 paws and a bigger heart than most people. He's special." "Yeah," Ethan said, rubbing Ranger's ears. "He is." A breeze picked up, rustling the trees. Ranger lifted his head, ears perked. Ethan knew that stance, it meant someone was approaching. Moments later, Deputy Miller appeared, dressed in plain clothes now, his usual intensity softened by the off-duty hour. Miller, a broad-shouldered man with thick eyebrows and a tightly trimmed beard, clapped Ethan on the shoulder. "Just wanted to say, you did well, brother. Real good." Ethan nodded, a rare warmth in his voice. "Couldn't have done it without backup." They shared a brief handshake. Ranger stood and circled the group once before settling at Ethan's feet again. As twilight painted the park in shades of lavender and rose, the town felt quieter, less burdened. The nightmares of abandonment, of betrayal, had been pushed back, at least for now. In their place stood something better: trust, loyalty, healing. Ethan stood up, brushing the seat of his jeans. "Come on, partner," he said, giving Ranger the signal. The German Shepherd rose, head high, body strong. They moved as one, steps in sync, silhouettes framed by the setting sun. From now on, no matter the road ahead, quiet patrols, new challenges, stormy nights, or peaceful walks, Ethan would never walk alone again. Sometimes God doesn't send angels with wings. Sometimes he sends them with 4 legs, a loyal heart, and eyes that see what the broken world tries to hide. Ranger was more than a dog. He was a miracle in fur, a guardian sent to walk beside a wounded soul. And Ethan? He found not just justice, but family. Because sometimes God restores what pain has stolen. If you believe God still works through love, through courage, and even through a dog's gentle bark, comment Amen, and share this story with someone who needs hope today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell. And may the Lord bless you and everyone you love, wherever your journey leads.